My name is Mildred, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I hail from the country across the border, and I have a home group. My home group is the Rocks Glen Traditional Group. We meet Mondays and Thursdays. Please call me if you're coming to Toronto. I would love to take you to my home group, which I love very much. I have a sponsor. I've had a sponsor all my life, all my sober life. My first sponsor I had for 42 years. He died 2 Christmases ago, and I have another sponsor now. He's not sober as long as I am, but that doesn't matter. He's doing the job nicely. My dry date is May the 18th, 1973, and I'm very glad to be here. And those are all the statistics you're going to get. Okay. I'm very happy to be here. I'm in a lovely room like this. It just makes me feel good and enthusiastic. And I love to see everybody dressed up. This is really, really nice, too. And I'm glad to be in Cleveland. I have a love affair with Cleveland, maybe with Ohio. I come to Columbus and I come various other places, and I can't explain it. I just have, I was saying to Michael, if I had to leave Toronto, I could live in Cleveland. There's something about being here that suits my spirit. So thank you for the invitation. And now it's my pleasure to share with you my experience, strength, and hope. I'll say it that way instead of to say my story, because I hope it won't be a story. I'm here to share with you what kind of person I used to be, what happened to me, what is in the process of happening to me, and what I'm like now. And that's a great experience, because the person you see today is not the person I always used to be. And so I love the story of the 2 caterpillars who were marching across a branch, eating leaves. And as they were doing this, a monarch butterfly flew overhead. And one of them looked at the other and said, "You'll never get me up in one of those." And I love that story, because there was a time, if you said to me, "You should stop drinking, you should go to AA," I would have said, "You'll never get me there." I had no idea, like the caterpillar, had no idea that it was not his destiny to stand on or walk on a branch and eat leaves. He was meant to be a monarch butterfly. I had no idea that I was on the planet to grow in God consciousness and to become consciously a God being. See, and so I think about what Bill wrote in step 10 of the 12 and 12, where he said we come here and it's a long process of change that goes on. He said we come here and he said we love but a few. We're indifferent to the many so long as they cause us no trouble, and then we just kind of hate the rest. Well, I identify with that, only I would change that. I hated everybody. I hated the world, I hated God, I hated myself, and I didn't really want to be here. So how do you go about becoming a person who's happy to say, "I'm conscious that I'm a God being"? That's the journey that I want to talk about. I know, too, that I have a purpose. I'm not meant to stay as a drunken person. It's part of the journey. And, I think on page 77, because I had this wrong for a while, I thought I was here to be of service. Page 77 says something else. It says, our next, how does it word it? We're here to fit ourselves. See, there was a time in my life where I did a lot of good, but I did it from the wrong perspective. And that's what I think this whole deal is about. We fit ourselves so that we can live in an appropriate way on the planet. So having said that, that's where I'm going with this talk. I was born in Saskatchewan, in that town that everybody has now heard of, where the bus accident took place, Humboldt. and I was born in a family of 10. We were Roman Catholic, and I was the baby. And I hated it all because very early in life, I found out that there was somebody in my family who cried a lot, and she was what they said at that time, retarded. She couldn't learn as fast as the other kids. The school system kept her in grade 3 till she was 16. She cried a lot. She'd crawl into bed with me. I was 3, she was 16, and she'd say, "Mildred, why was I ever born?" I'm telling you that because, for a very specific reason, because I think that, we know now that our personality, our ideas, some of the old things that we carry in our subconscious, they're formed in us by the time we're 7. That's scientific. We know that now spiritually. And at my age, I still have some of the things I took on there. That's my spiritual work, to say that's not the truth. This is the truth. So how did all this come about? So I asked my family, who I thought loved me, to fix my sister, and they didn't. I misunderstood that. I thought what I took on was, I'm not important, nobody really cares about me, I don't fit, and I could go on about that. And I can tell you, that was at the bottom of my alcoholism. That was at the bottom of my drinking, because I felt so uncomfortable on the planet. And so I asked God. We were Roman Catholic. We went to church every Sunday. I asked God to fix it, and God didn't. So I thought, God fixed it, but not on my time. And you see, so I kind of turned against God in the sense I figured God's kind of a useless twit. Like, what's the use of praying? What's the use of asking? That same God can make sunsets. That same God can make the aurora borealis. But when I ask for a simple thing like this, the priest says God is love and God is power, and then he does nothing about it. And you can see I had no understanding of how life is. And I think many of us, we have our own ideas and our own experiences of how that happened. And so what happened to me was I took a drink at 5. I didn't take a drink because I knew what was going to happen. I didn't know that I would get the sense of ease and comfort. I didn't know about the unnatural reaction to alcohol. But I took that drink because my father was serving drinks to his friends, and little Mildred poured a drink into herself, and that's what happened. I felt so beautiful, and I felt so lovely, and I knew I could handle my sister. I loved the world. I loved the way I felt. And so Dr. Silkworth says, we get a sense of ease and comfort, and that's exactly what I got. And that's what I chased for the next 35 years, because there were 2 people. One was the person, me, without booze in me, uncomfortable in the world, hating being here. And the other was the me that got the unnatural reaction, and I could behave. At the beginning, I could behave better because I felt better. I saw things different. I liked that, and that's what I chased to the gates of insanity and death. It didn't happen overnight, but I can tell you I was an alcoholic from the word go. It's just a word, but I got that feeling, and that's what I wanted, and that's what I chased. Now, I'm a person who doesn't fit, say I. I'm smart, but I don't fit in a lot of the things that my compatriots were doing, like sports. I'm a klutz. And where I shone was in school. And so when it came to books and study, that was me. I was there. I graduated from high school when I was 14. I didn't fit going to university, and so I hung around home with a bunch of kids, 10 boys and 3 girls. And we drank and we partied and we sang and we had a great time. And one day, one of the girls spoiled it all because I was kind of the queen of that group. And she took my place. She announced she was going to become a nun. And they made a big fuss over her. And I thought, I want some of that. So I waited about 3 weeks, and then I announced, I'm going to become a nun. They did not make a fuss over me. They laughed like you did. So now it became, I've got something to prove. And I went to the finishing school where the nuns were that I thought I would join, and they laughed. They said, you don't belong in a convent. Get your tush to university. I went to the hospital, begged them to take me. They said, you don't belong in a convent. Our pastor said, you don't belong in a convent. I've got something to prove, and by God, I found a convent where I thought we were going to have a swinging experience. So I wrote to the States. I thought, Canadian convents, they're boring. I'm going to find a swinging convent in the States. I did find one, but they said we have a convent in Waterdown, which, if you know, Toronto was near Hamilton, and that's where I joined. I entered there. They took me sight unseen, and they took me without smelling me. I was drunk the night I entered, because by that time I was 17 years old, and I was dyed-in-the-wool alcoholic. I drank all the time if I could. I'm not one of those who said I tried to stop. If you're alcoholic and you love drinking and you like the way it makes you feel, why would you want to stop? I can cope with all the trouble that I get into. And so they accepted me that night, and I stayed for 15 years. And I'm sure some of you would like me to talk about what those experiences were like. I can tell you I lied and cheated and stole with the best of them. And I justified the fact that I did that. Did I feel guilty? Kind of. Because my feeling was this. I went to this convent. I'm looking for God. I'm looking for help. I need to change. I can't do life sober. I need somebody to fix me some way to get this thing on the road. And so I can't do it sober, so I've got to drink. That was my justification. And I'm telling you, if you're competent and you work hard, you get away with murder. They knew what I was up to. Mother Superior, I found out later, but nobody in 15 years ever said to me, you know, you're drunk all the time. And I was. That's why they call me the Flying Nun. And I went to a conference one time after I was sober, and somebody came to me and said, "You're not Sally Field." I said, "No." I said, "Why would you say that?" She said, "Because they billed you as the Flying Nun." I thought Sally Field was going to be here. Surprise, surprise. Well, anyway, after 15 years of that, Mother Superior and I had a chat, and she said, "You know, sister," she said, "I really like you." And, you know, it's a funny thing how recovery was not a common word. People didn't really understand what the disease was about. And so as far as she was concerned, I drink too much. It's because I'm unhappy. If I leave, I'll be okay. And so we wrote to Rome, and I got my dispensation, and another phase of my life started. I remember standing on the convent steps, January the 10th, 1966, and I was sure I had my secular name back. I was no longer Sister Mary Eugenia. I was Mildred Kaltoff again. I had my secular clothes on, and I had been dispensed from the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And as far as I was concerned, I was good to go. I was set for life. It was going to be different. See, I had no idea that the problem was inside me. I was a well-educated woman by that time. I had no idea. If you fix it on the outside, that's what you have to do, and it'll be okay. And I spent a good portion of my life even in AA, fixing the outside, thinking then I'm going to be okay. And I have found that is not absolutely the way it works at all. And so I set out and I found what I needed. I found it booze, and I found the bars, and I found the men. And in 10 months, I was leading a life of degradation. I was out of the convent 3 months when I got thrown in jail. And I made such a fuss that the police chief was there that day, and he came down to my cell. And he had a paper on which the things I had done were written. And I still remember him looking at me. And he looked at me with a sense of disgust. And he said, "What's wrong with you?" How do you answer that? He said, "Look at this. You did this and you did this and you..." I was only out of the He said, 3 months ago, he said you were in a convent. How do you get to this place? And he said, "Don't ever find yourself in this jail again." Because he said, "I'll come looking for you." So 10 months go by, and I have gone down the landslide of degradation. There isn't much I've done, or haven't done, rather. And so I decided to sign myself into an insane asylum because somebody told me there was a psychiatrist there who would help me. See, it's always on the outside. Come and fix me. Make me okay. I can't do it myself. And so I went to this place. My brother found me there, and he took me to the West. See, I remember the day when Tom I took me aside, and he said, "Mildred, I want to tell you something." He said, and he told me about being in the penitentiary and how he had gotten out. And he said, "I have found that there is a power of good. And if I say nothing else today, that's the message. I have found that there's a power of good." That's what he said. He said, "I had plans for my life, and those plans did not materialize." But he said, "That power of good has led me to exactly the place where I am today." And he said, "It's all been unbelievable." And that's exactly the message I have. I have found there's a power of good, because my brother said to me, "Do you want to go to Regina or Saskatoon?" I said Saskatoon. I didn't know what I was picking. I was to meet 2 men who were my destiny. One was Dr. Hoffer, who was a friend of Bill Wilson's, and he got involved in my case. By this time, I had been locked up 32 times in psych wards. I had had 38 electroshock treatments. That will light up your life, believe me. And I had been tied to the bed, and trust me, it was not for fun and frolic. And Dr. Hoffer took a look at my dossier, and he said, she's not all this stuff. She doesn't have all these psychiatric illnesses. She's an alcoholic and should go to AA. I was excited because I have a brother who got sober, and when he got sober, that was the early 50s, people weren't talking about AA in Saskatchewan, and my dad called me and he said, "Your brother is not going to die." He said he's been transformed. That was my father's word. What? And he said, there's this organization has come to Saskatchewan. He said they call it Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what it is, but he said it's so good, and he started to cry. And when Dr. Hoffer said she should go to AA, all of that came roaring into me, and I said, yes, I'll go to AA, and I'm going to get transformed, and then everybody's going to be happy with me. And so I said there were 2 men there that were my destiny. The other was a psychiatrist. Lucky man, I married him. So I went to AA. 5.5 years. I went to AA. The word sticking in my head was transformed. I'm going to be transformed. I sat in the front row to the left of center, third seat. That was my seat. I sat there waiting. I didn't know who was going to do it, and I didn't know how it was going to happen. But by God, I'm in my seat, and it's going to happen. See, just think. I had not a clue, none, not a clue, that it was going to have to be an internal change and that it's a process and I was going to have to do some work to do it. I sat there. I don't know what I thought was going to happen. And three weeks go by. I haven't changed. Me and untreated alcoholism, you got a problem looking at you. And so I sat there. I know about drugs. So I sat there stoned for 5.5 years. I'm just going to say that. I did it. And what did I hear in AA? There were people like Mac Cheater. See, I remember the love those men had for me. Mac Cheater, Cease Corrigal, Wesley Parrish, Chuck Chamberlain used to come. He'd sit with me and talk to me. I couldn't hear the music of AA. And if you're sitting there and you can't hear the music of AA, I get that. Keep coming. And one day maybe the right conductor will come and they'll play a song that you can hear. And that's what happened to me. I kept going for 5.5 years. Chuck used to say to me, "You've got one problem." I thought I had multiple problems. He said, "You've got one problem. You think you're separate from God." And, you know, my attitude was, don't talk God. I've read more God books than you have, and I know about God, and God doesn't work. So just leave that alone. He was right. He said, you know, when you get that straight, you'll be okay. And I think I've got it straight today, and I'm just fine. Thanks very much. Not perfect, but fine. So, where am I? I'm going to meetings. And eventually I just left. Why go to stupid AA? I don't need you. And I'm going to be okay. You bet I was. I wasn't out 48, and I had jumped out of a 2-story window. I had been driven a 2-story window. I remember throwing the chair down so I land on the chair and I hurt myself. All my education sure did me a lot of good, didn't it? I was explaining to Mike before I didn't have much sense about how things work. A lot of sense up here, but not about how things work. And I drank for 1.5 years. My husband was an alcoholic too. You know, I can tell you, alcoholism is no respecter of persons. It doesn't care how smart you are. It doesn't care how much you've accomplished or how much you've acquired. My husband was director of a hospital, and we both went down the tube where there was nothing. And I left, and I wound up on a park bench. See, I drank for 1.5 years and lost all credibility, lost all friends. When I was done, this is what people said: stay away from us. Don't come near us. You come on our property, we'll have you arrested. I was a nasty little piece of work. And so there was no place for me but park bench. And that's where I lived as a tramp for about a month. And one morning, you know, I could go into all kinds of horror stories. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. I didn't know how I could live. I had no understanding of how life works. I didn't care about you. I didn't care about myself. And the morning of May the 18th, 1973, remember what Tom Ivester said, this power of good, and I still remember his hand doing that. And he said that power has carried me, shown me the way to every place that I needed to go. These policemen picked me up, took me to a psych ward, and that was no big surprise. And the morning of the 20th, I'm homeless. And I don't say this, it makes me happy to say it, because the experience of how it has changed is so enormous, I can hardly put words to it. I was homeless. I was friendless. My family didn't want me. My mother said, "You cannot come home." She said, "You've got nieces and nephews in this town." And she said, "The way you are living is disgusting. And if you stop drinking and drugging, you can come home." And I said, "I don't need that. I'm not coming." And she said, "Mildred," and I had big problems with my mother, but she was a quintessential Al-Anon, yet she never went to an Al-Anon meeting. She said, "Mildred, if that's the choice you make, that's the one we'll live with, but so will you." And I did. And so I made up my mind that morning because I didn't have 5 cents. There was nobody I could ask. There was nobody left to manipulate. There was nobody left to beg. And so I made up my mind, I'm done. There's a great line in the book. It says we must fully concede to our innermost selves that we're alcoholic. I had done that years ago. What I had never conceded to myself was this. I had never fully conceded to myself what the book says is the problem. It says it. Self is what had defeated us. I wouldn't have worded it that way, but what I saw that morning was the way I'm living, it works, life works for you, it doesn't work for me, so I'm out of here. Half an hour, I remember thinking, half an hour, I don't know what's on the other side. Right now, I don't care. I'm going to take my life, I'm ending it, and we'll see about the next piece. So I asked the nurse to get my coat. I mean, if you're going to kill yourself, you better be warm. And she left to get my coat. I am a great believer in giving in. I don't like the word surrender because surrender has too much baggage to it. Giving in is what I did that morning. I totally admitted, I don't know how to do this. The power that I believe in today has no problem with that. It knows how to do everything. And if I get my fists down and instead say, I don't know, I haven't gotten my way, but the power of good has taken me. And so I stood there waiting for my coat, and the unbelievable happened. I was changed in a heartbeat. I had one of those bang-up spiritual, what else can I call it? Because one minute, I'm the person I've described to you, and the next minute, I stood there, and I was changed. That's all I can say. And I'm not going to put it any other way because it is what happened. In an instant, the compulsion and the obsession was lifted. And in 45 years, I have never had it ever in any way, shape, or form. It's done. And I remember standing there. I didn't know what had happened. I wouldn't have told you it was God. I just knew something unbelievable had happened, and I remember saying out loud, I can hear my voice saying, I don't have to drink anymore. I'm clean inside. And I was. I was. You'll have to send me somebody because I don't know how to live sober. I think the good things all come from that great power. They might filter through. That morning, filtered directly through me. And I knew that something had changed inside. And I said, I don't know how to live sober. I always get sober. Couldn't you? Many times, but I couldn't pull it off. Live in this third dimension world. And I hated you and I hated myself, and I didn't understand any of it. And as I said it, there was a rap on the door. Honest to God, a man stood there. I think he was there because he said to me, I saw you at breakfast. Like, how does that happen, that man comes right at that time? You have your own stories. You know, I think we need to wake up to the fact there is no coincidence. This power is there. And if our consciousness allows it, it does for us what we can't do for ourselves. And that is exactly what has happened to me over and over. And this man stood there and he said, I saw you at breakfast. He said, you're in trouble, aren't you? I said, yeah, you want to make something of it? And he said, no. He said, I came to offer you some help. He said, there's a treatment center hospital. In 1973, there were no treatment centers in Toronto. Dr. Bell had started this place, Hospital Treatment Center, and he believed that people who were addicted, some of them needed more help, and I went there. He said, I'll take you tomorrow, because this was Sunday. He said, I'll take you tomorrow if you'll go, and I said yes, and he came. You know, it always reminds me how many good people and how many things happen just the way they should. Sometimes I'm sitting there thinking, it should happen now, and it should happen this way, and it doesn't. It happens in the right way. And so that man came and he took me to Donwood, and I was there 28 days, and I left Donwood homeless and penniless. They gave me enough money to get a room on Skid Row, and I lived on Skid Row for a year. I would like sometime to have the time to talk about that year. I was hungry most of the time. I was cold a lot of the time. I had no fancy stuff. I had no radio. I had no television. I don't know yet I think about that year, and it was necessary for my soul. My soul was quiet. I went to the hospital, to Donwood, once a week. I walked 8 miles to go see a man who was sent there as my angel. He was the psychiatrist at Donwood. I'd go see him, and he encouraged me. He loved me, and he cared for me. That was my only human contact. After 6 months, I wasn't going to AA. That isn't how this story goes. And one morning I was in the institution, and a man stopped me and said, do you want to come with me to a meeting? Since I hadn't had a lot of invitations by men, I said yes. I didn't know where we were going. We went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my life has never been the same, because I don't remember what happened at that meeting except this. Those nice people who were dressed much like you are this morning, they said to me, please come back. You want me back? My teeth are knocked out. My hair is straggly. I don't have nice clothes, and I have nothing pretty to say. I'm just a blob there. That's not what they saw. They said, please come back. And I came back. And I fell in love. I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have to tell you, I have done many goofy things, some immoral, maybe a few illegal since I've been sober. But one thing I have done right, I have never walked away from Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a sponsor. She had blonde hair, gold earrings, and a white suit. Brilliant qualifications for a sponsor. And in about 3 months, she got drunk. And two men stepped up to the plate. They didn't want sex or anything. They stepped up to the plate because I didn't get a sponsor right away. And this is what they said to me. There are lots of things I won't get to say today, but this I want to make sure I say. They said to me, Mildred, you are too sick to stay here if you don't do the steps. I don't know, but sometimes what I sense is we're trying to get sober taking pills. We're trying to get sober with therapy. We're trying to get sober with all kinds of extraneous means. if I hadn't had them, I would have done the same. I don't think this is a self-help program. I don't think it's a pill help program. I don't think it's even a psychology help program. I think psychology fits, but not as the means of getting sober. It's God's grace from beginning to end, all the way. If I want the good life, that's what I have to do. And that's what my life consists in now, and I make no apologies for it. Sure, I live in the third dimension. I have a car, I've got a home, I've got money, I've got stuff. But that's not what I'm sober about. And so they said, you have to do the steps. I said, I don't know how. I remember the days when I couldn't read 2 sentences in a book and know what I had read. That's how broken I was. They said, you come early, we'll read the book to you, we'll tell you what to do. And that's exactly how I did. We've got all these fancy book studies, noun step studies. I'm not against them, but I know it's the gist, the truth that's there. And it's not just hearing the truth. They held me accountable. They told me what to do for each step, and then they'd check me out when I'd come back, and I got to stay sober. I got to stay sober. And I tell my sponsees that right from the get-go, this is what we're going to do, and let me help you. And if they do it, they too get that promise at the end. It's not a big house, it's not a big job, it's none of that stuff. It's I'm going to wake up spiritually, and that is a progressive thing. I'm going to read you something that Bill wrote. He said there is no shortcut to inner growth. No shortcut. People sometimes say to me, and they're puzzled, that I, at 45 years, go to meetings. I need meetings more today than I did before. I have to grow spiritually. See, also Bill said this. He said, centering our awareness on the divinity and approaching our actions from the standpoint of the divine, that is the timeless path of our spiritual growth. I'll tell you the way my spiritual growth has happened. The first thing I had to do was get abstinent. That's number one. I'm not saying, I've said it many times, alcohol was never my problem. It was my solution. And because it was such a good solution, it became a problem. But that's the first thing I had to do. Then I got stuff. And then I found the Spirit. And then I've become human. And in that order. I was not a nice human being. I didn't know how to be a nice human being. So they took me through the steps, and at the end of that 1 year, the God Shot started. The God Shot, I got a teaching job. I got back into the school. I got a sponsor. He had a size 16 shoe, and he didn't mind using it on me. As he said, I'm not here to tell you make decisions for you. I'm here to show you how the spiritual life works and the way you can think about things so you can learn to make good decisions. And that is precisely what he did. And at the end of that 7 years, I had separated from my husband. I had taken on another guy, and he couldn't stay sober, but I was 3 years sober. I thought, I can get him sober. Yeah, right. Shows you where my head was. One day I came home and the poor man was lying on my bed and he was shaking and he said, Millie, get me some beer. I said, no. I said, you pray. He said, I don't want to pray. Well, I definitely had the advantage. I was healthy. I grabbed his ears. I pounded his head on the bed and I said, you pray, you son of a bitch. Fellas, you should say thanks you didn't come across my path. And then I went to Al-Anon. And I discovered something in Al-Anon. I haven't continued going, not because I couldn't use it, but I discovered something in Al-Anon. I discovered there were people on the planet who weren't getting their way, and they were finding a way to be happy. I can't tell you how important that was. It gave a whole new interest and a whole new meaning to my sobriety. And then at 7 years, one day, another God shot. A teacher said to me, "You should buy a house." My sponsor made me pay off my debts and I had no money saved. And she said, "We can tell you how to do this." And I have to tell you, I didn't have to sleep with anybody to do it. I bought my first house. I bought a lot of houses, and I became really quite rich. And I say that not to impress. I say it because there was a message in there. Because somewhere in my head, in that first 20 years of sobriety again, if I just get the outside, that means I've got the right clothes, I've got the right friends, I've built a big house, I've got the red convertible. I'm fine, thank you very much. And what I found was I was dying inside. I remember the day sitting on the curb at the Inn on the Park in Toronto, bawling my eyes out, and my friend saying, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I think I'm dying." What was wrong? I hadn't really, and please understand this, I think that growing in the program, it's an individual thing. God, yes, we have steps, we have things we have to do, absolutely, but you can do that, and yet each of us is unique. And I believe the Spirit deals with us according to who we are. It was good for me to make that money because I learned the lesson. I had it, and I wasn't okay. I was sitting at meetings feeling left out. I was sitting at meetings with all that crap that I had taken on as a child. I'm not okay. I don't fit. I'm not happy, and I don't know how to get happy. And the next big car isn't going to fix it. The house isn't going to fix it. Now what? Now what? God sent the right people. There was a man at a meeting who talked about his childhood. He didn't dwell on it, and I'm not dwelling on it, but it put the bug in my ear, so to speak. He talked about how he was not doing well in business and how he should have been because everything was all right for it. And he said somebody came along and showed him that his father had told him as a little boy, "You'll never amount to anything. Doesn't matter. You're a little jerk, and things will never go right for you." That's the voice he heard. And the voices I heard were the voices that said, "You don't fit." And I couldn't figure it. Like, nobody was mean. There was nothing wrong. I had done the steps. But I think that this business of being sober, it's about continuing to grow. I have to grow every day. Spiritually, there's work for me to do. Maybe it is to be a little kinder. Maybe it is to say to the false self, "No, you're not going to run my life today." You know, there's stuff in the big book. It says the day will come when faced by a self-imposed crisis, you will have to God is everything or nothing. Sober when, and I said, I don't nothing. I don't know what it is. And you know what today? I don't know what it is. I like what Tom said. It's a power of good. Good enough for me. It's my God. And that power, I believe, is everywhere. It also says in there that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. It says I've got to find a power by which I can live. See, I don't know what ideas I had about spirituality. I thought maybe, spirituality meant that I could pray a lot and meditate and that would fix it. I don't think so. I think that prayer and meditation prepare me to go out and engage the world and live in the real world and meet the people I meet in the airport, meet the people in Cleveland, and meet the people wherever I am, and be engaged. And like St. Francis says, I'm an instrument. I'm an instrument. I'm supposed to be an instrument. And to get to that place, I've got to give up the hatred and the judgment. Look at what page 55 says. You know, I think that the big book amazes me. This is the first 164 pages. Somebody in Texas gave me a copy of it, and I carry it with me because it's a book. I don't know how many times I've read it, and I would swear that somebody has taken that book and added stuff. Because when I'm ready, I hear stuff. I hear stuff, you know, deep within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It is only there that he may be found. Read the book, and you will not see one place where it says, I have to like you. I always think if you like everybody, you're on something. Love is a different thing. If that spirit is within you, then it behooves me to treat you accordingly, which means hatred has to go, judgment has to go, dislike has to go, gossip has to go, and I have to nurture. I have to be present to that spirit, that it becomes more real. I often say to people if I'm giving a retreat, which would you rather have, $1 million or growth in God consciousness? If you tell me you'd sooner have the growth in God consciousness, I wonder about you. Because isn't it true? Most of us say, well, you know, nothing wrong with $1 million. I'll take the million and then I'll do good with it. And then I'll get spiritual. That isn't, I don't think that's, the only reason I say that is the third dimension. You know what Carl Jung said? He talked about the gnawing, the secret gnawing, at that feeling of emptiness at the roots of our being. You know, and I'm sure that I've said it. I've got holes in my soul. No, I don't. If God is present, there's no hole in my soul. But I can feel that. I can feel as if that's the case. And that's the wonder of this thing. You know, we do the work and we wake up spiritually. And we see things different. Where I believe today that the most important thing that my prayer and meditation prepares me for the holy work. And the holy work is living life, and how I treat people, and how my consciousness sees the world. That's how things, that's what has changed in me. And so, you know, I look at it, and I think a couple of, well, one more story and then I'll sit down. When I was at that place at 21 years where I was suicidal again because I didn't know what to do. I've got the stuff, but I'm also a good member of AA. But see, there was inner work that had to happen. And I think everybody has it. Everybody may not be the same as mine, but there comes a day where that relationship has to deepen. It says so on page 164. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and then great things will come to pass for you and countless others. God put people in my life, and I had some work to do, and I came to the States and I lived with a family for a while, and I learned about the subconscious and the stuff that's buried. And don't say she shouldn't be talking about that. Bill talked about it in step 8 of the 12 and 12. his experience about what's buried there and what has to be looked after. And I changed. I came back to Toronto, and one day the phone rang, and it was Father O'Brien. I'd never heard of Father O'Brien, a Jesuit priest near Toronto. And he said, I want you to come and give a retreat. Me? I said, do you know how many times I've been excommunicated? And he said, I don't care about that. He said, I want you to come and give a retreat, and I went. I put it together, and I went. And I tell you this because, again, it's a God shot. I was finishing that retreat to 70 women, and at that time, I wasn't crazy about women. I still saw women kind of as the competition. And as I was finishing the last talk, I started to bawl. I don't bawl in front of women. I know how to do a strategic tear in front of a man. I do. But I started to bawl, and I said to that bunch of women, I said, I'm the loneliest person in the world. I said, I don't have a friend. I have lots of acquaintances. See, when I was a child, I put up the walls. I didn't know that's what I had done. And that morning, I was 21 years sober, and bang, the walls came down. And I had to learn to live without walls. If you know me today, you know I'm pretty straightforward and I'm pretty transparent. Because I know today, that's the healing that had to take place. I wrote down the order I've changed. That I got sober, that I got stuff, lots of stuff, and really spiritual. I became human. Mm-hmm. Then I started to love people. I can truthfully say to you, I love you today. I like you. I used to say to a man in the program, Ted, how do you do that? You seem to like everybody. And he couldn't tell me. And I can't tell you. But I really like people today. And I just see the world so different. How does a person like me change? Another of Bill's, he said how to translate, in that article on emotional sobriety, how to translate right mental connection into a right emotional result. Isn't it an amazing thing, in however you have experienced life, that you can be here this morning, sitting comfortably at tables, chatting with people, and, planning things and whatever. What else are you going to call it? It's not psychological. Sure, it's in a sense, but basically I believe it's the grace of God. And so for you, I would say, my prayer for you is that you too will see to it that your relationship with Him is right. And then great things will come to pass for you and countless others. God bless you.